We are social creatures. And so this idea of us belonging to a tribe is something that we thrive on and we crave. Belonging to that group helps us to become something that is more desirable. That's what gets employees to stay somewhere, even though the pay may not be as good as it is somewhere else. They're staying there because they have this sense of belonging, and not just belonging to a place, but belonging to a good place.
The Tow Trend Podcast. Dynamic conversations with industry experts and special guests. Featuring your hosts, Shelli Hawkins and Dennis McGowan. Brought to you by Atura.
We're back with episode 2 of the Tow Trend Podcast. I am Dennis McGowan, one of your hosts, alongside
Shelli Hawkins. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Shelli. And we have 2 incredible guests with us today. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. As you can see, we have 2 just industry experts here. We've got Shane Coleman, the National Director of Training of ERSCA, and we've got Bear Godfrey, Lead Instructor of WreckMaster. Shane leads ERSCA's National Training Program and brings over 33 years of towing and recovery experience. And Bear is a veteran tow professional and Lead Instructor with WreckMaster, entered in the industry in 2004. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely.
Where are you guys sitting today?
Well, I'm currently in my my what I affectionately call my coach's corner here,
Nice.
but I'm in Michigan today. So, yeah.
Fantastic. What part of Michigan? Our listeners will want to hear.
Yeah, so just outside of Detroit. So Troy is my hometown.
Oh.
So yeah, just about 30 minutes away from Detroit proper. So yeah.
Sure. Bear, where are you today also?
I am in WreckMaster's Western Outpost in the booming metropolis of Newdale, Idaho, right on the western slopes of the Rockies. If it was not snowing sideways today, I could look out my window and look at the Grand Tetons. So weather is not cooperating with that view, but such is life.
It is
Welcome.
77 degrees and sunny here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex.
So I will see 77 next May.
Nice.
That's May.
Yeah.
Wow. So diverse. And I'm here in Columbia, Maryland with, 60s and like upper 30s in the morning. And it's a bright, beautiful, sunshiny day. Fall is here with all of our leaves changing. And we're getting ready we really don't experience snow in Columbia, Maryland. We get ice in Columbia and Baltimore, Maryland. More like ice with a few snows.
We've got 2 incredible guests here and 2 gentlemen who need no introduction, but I would love to hear from you both a little bit about your story and how you came to be where you are today. Shane, since you're in my upper left corner, can we start with you?
Oh, sure. So I kind of give you what I affectionately call the Reader's Digest version. So, I started kind of what was traditionally in the towing industry in a family towing business. So, literally the city that I'm sitting in right now, my parents operated a towing company, a full service company for about 40 years. I was in the last, say, 25 to 28 of those. And then throughout my time, the 33, which is now, going on a few more, just made my way through the industry, a couple different roles, manager, operator, worked at a major manufacturer for a while, and then transitioned from that role to the role that I'm at now as the director of training here at ERSCA. So it's been an interesting journey. There's been a lot that I've learned over that time. And it'll kind of like usually, like if I'm in a training environment, I share a little bit of that background just so they kind of know my walk of life. But it seems like even with all that time, I have another 33 plus years of stuff to learn because so much has changed. So my motivation is just to, hopefully continue to at least support the industry the best I can to make sure that we can keep the industry in good graces and safe. So
I love that so much, Shane. For our listeners, what is ERSCA? What does it stand for? What are you a part of?
Yeah, so we say ERSCA. such a long-winded name. So its official name is the Emergency Road Service Coalition of America. It's a nonprofit. It's board run, and all of the board members are towing business owners. So every one of the owners, they have different size businesses. They have, different books of business, but they all have the same struggles or the same challenges that every other tow business owner has. Everything from kind of what we're going to talk about today with some training, all the way to, liability issues, insurance struggles, just a number of things. So they have a real kind of palpable feel as to what the industry is experiencing. And, their goal with supporting the training program is to, kind of foster some of the, I guess, healing parts that training can kind of fix, if I can say it that way.
That's great.
Bear, how about you?
The quick and dirty version of my entry into the towing industry. I was not. I didn't grow up in the towing industry. I grew up on a farm, and yes, being from Idaho, I grew up on a potato farm, and eat potatoes about every day still. So, but just out of high school, my dad and I quit farming about the time I graduated from high school. I had a couple of other smaller jobs. My dad started helping a local guy who had a body shop with his tow trucks. And when he started doing that, the guy had a relationship with Idaho Wrecker Sales out of Mountain Home, and Chuck Ciccarelli, who was the owner of that. Some of you may know him as the man from In the Ditch. He was the lead instructor. And so after a little while, one winter when I had been working as on a landscaping crew, I was running some equipment for them. And one winter when we were laid off, I had the opportunity to go and help my dad and this guy who had the body shop. And they said, hey, if you're going to come and help us, we need to get you to a WreckMaster class so you understand what we're talking about. And so that next spring, I went to a WreckMaster class with Chuck there in Mountain Home. And as we usually say, I got infected at that point. And so I went through a WreckMaster class. I went through a 2-3 there in the spring. I went to another 4-5 in the fall. And then the following spring, I went back to North Carolina for my 6-7 at the week-long. That was when we had the week-long classes there in Fayetteville. And got together with my dad, and we decided to buy the towing operation from this gentleman that had the body shop, and that was my entry into it. So I was very fortunate to start from the beginning with formal training as a priority, even though I didn't, I wasn't around the business. That transition to, I built a relationship with Chuck, who kind of put his arm around my shoulder and brought me along. I started with WreckMaster in 2009 as an apprentice, really part-time, still trying to run a towing company. Continued to run that towing company for several years, and then became a lead instructor with WreckMaster in 2013. And then, it will be 2 years ago this coming April, I stepped away from the towing business as a whole and took a full-time position with WreckMaster, where I deal with a little more of the administrative side now.
I love that. And when I think about instructors in the industry, you get to know a lot of folks that are out there that are passionate, like you both are, training, passing on your knowledge. And I hold you both in extremely high regard. With your knowledge, when I think about someone who's going to be training, they need to be knowledgeable and they also need to be humble. And you both certainly possess those two characteristics. And I have so much respect for both of you. I got an opportunity to attend a Shane Coleman heavy-duty rigging class not too long ago, Shane Coleman in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And Renee and I went up there to Sherry Morgan's. She hosted the event. I think there were over 50 folks that were there. Yeah, operators.
That was a pretty large class.
Yeah, and we
good time.
Cement mixers and all kinds of things, and it was fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us and introing yourself. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite, for sure.
You betcha.
We really do appreciate it. But obviously, we're here to talk about training, and we're here to talk about why training is more important than ever. And you two gentlemen obviously work for two competing entities, right? Why are we here together today? And I'd love to hear from both of you on this. Feel free to jump in, whoever's interested to start here. But I would love to hear from both of you. Why come together today and have this conversation with us? Other than Shelli asked nicely.
I did ask nicely. It's true.
She's very persuasive that way. In a good way. I mean that in all sincerity. Yeah.
You know, the first time that I met Shane was actually in one of my roles as an instructor. Shane was had come down to the week long in Fayetteville. It was one of the last week longs that I taught at, and that was my first introduction to him. We built I would say a pretty good friendship on a couple of things that I really feel like our industry, oh man, we could use a boost of that. And one of the things was just a willingness to have open dialogue, right? A willingness to talk and to share. And Shane, having spent some time, you know, with WreckMaster as a trainer, and then in many other facets of his career teaching, had some excellent points to help me along my path as an instructor. He gave me some great pointers, some critiques, and I really was able to use that. So why come together? Well, that same wonderful relationship that we built from that first interaction, we need as towers. Like and please believe me when I say I'm a fan of competition. Like I grew up in a household where we wrestled, and so competition is like when people say I fought with my siblings, I usually have to ask them, okay, did you argue loudly or did you really fight? Like in my house, we fought. Like there was blood many times. But so I'm a fan of competition, but at the same time, we have this mentality in the towing industry of going a step beyond what is really constructive competition. And we're gatekeeping a lot of the things that we need to progress to become a better paying industry, a better behaving industry. We need that sense of camaraderie, that sense of willingness to listen, not just to respond, but to understand where someone is coming from, and then start to incorporate that.
That is the quote of our show: not just listening, but listening to understand.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Yep, that's an excellent point. So I guess, you know, I guess it's just it's a personal and a professional struggle for me on the competitive side. I heard it best earlier this year. I was at the Mid-Atlantic show that the TRPNC, the North Carolina Association, hosted. And I crossed paths with a gentleman, Jimmy Collins, out of Tennessee. And he said, there's so much to do in this industry, and there's so much work that has to be done. He said, he kind of framed it this way. He said, we're competitive, but we're not really competitors.
Love it.
And I latched onto that because that, for me, it's a complete different point of view. As Bear, as you were talking there, we've heard the expression iron sharpens iron, right? So similar to when you're in a competitive environment, it's really pushing each other to become better, whatever it is, whatever the discipline is, whether it's towing recovery training or the arts or whatever. And I really think that fostering the relationships among competitive organizations, similar to what I have been wanting to do more often than not, especially like the conversations, Bear, you and I had, is that we can get together and share experiences and share ideas, and iron sharpens iron. Like we can pick up tips and tricks, how-tos, and, new information. So for me, coming together today it's a chance to show that we are planks in a bridge, right? Like we're building a bridge throughout the industry that we can all walk across to get from different places and learn hopefully some new knowledge, some new information, and kind of take that edge off. I don't need to talk to that guy, or we don't associate with them. And, when I have competitors in our trainings, I usually tell them, if you're going to wave at your competitor, make sure you use all your fingers. Okay. Yeah. I grew up during a time, I'll probably date myself a little bit, but I grew up during a time where all of the family towing businesses got along together, and they called it trading. So we would trade off jobs because we didn't have the capacity to, go everywhere and do everything. And I think today with as broad and as deep as the industry has gotten, I don't think that all of us can do it. So I think it's going to collectively take us all to pull it all together so that we're all pulling on the rope in the same direction, which is to make sure that everybody's, effective, efficient, safe, going home at the end of the shift. I never want to miss out on an opportunity to be able to collaborate. And I did. Shelley, Dennis, I commend you guys for putting something like this together, because it's things like this that kind of foster that, So that would be what I would share.
Yeah, and like we've said, we're thrilled to have you both here. This is going to be a fun ride here. I think we're going to learn a little bit, and I think we're going to laugh a little bit too. But training is top tier, right? Training is more important than it's ever been in this industry, right? We're seeing, if you go to trade shows, if you go to events, if you look around the news, training is top of line for a lot of businesses these days. What has changed over the past 3, 5, 10 years that we have seen such an uptick in training, and we've seen such more of an adoption of training across the industry?
Because I'll ask the question, what was it like if you were an operator 30, 20 years ago?
So,
Did you receive training at all, or were you just learned on the job? I can only imagine.
We talked about this last month, Shelley. It was, here's the keys, go figure it out.
yeah.
Like you were, like happened to you, Dennis. That's right. That's right.
So, yeah, God, I wish I could catalog what I've seen over time, but so it was on the job training. So literally when I started in the industry, it was, hey, go ride, you're going to ride with these guys, and then you're going to ride with your older brother who was 8 years my elder, and he'd already seen and done a lot, had a good, and you just kind of banked off that experience. I mean, the only real official training before I took my first training class, I did a home study course that the University of Georgia had.
Wow.
So
Really?
it was part of their continuing ed department, and they had collaborated and put this home study program. And you read through the materials, you took the test, you mailed it in, they mailed it back, and you see whether you passed or not. So
That's wild. And Shane, do you remember anything about that? Like, do you remember where that came from? Who, because there's not very many guys back at that point that really had much influence in stuff. Where did that information come from?
I had a conversation with somebody at the Las Vegas show this year, and they had told me who was involved in getting that program started, and I can't remember, to be honest. But I know there was some industry partners in helping the university develop that. So at that point, whether it was TRAA and some of the others that were doing the trainings back then, could have been them. You said
this is the state of Georgia?
Yeah, it was the University of Georgia Department for Continuing Education.
Was it towing focused or more like crane principles, or what was it?
No, it was all towing focused. And at that point, they only had a light duty, what we called light duty. It was a light duty program. So it was the proper use of slings and using 4x4s and support blocks and J hooks and dollies, and it was all basic light duty stuff. You didn't really, to kind of move forward a few years, really didn't see a lot until TRAA started putting out, and that, God bless the guy for being a part of it. But when Mark Anderson worked with TRAA and did a lot of the heavy duty videos and the presentations when they started their program, that was really all you had. You ordered and this will be a dating part. You ordered the VHS tapes.
Yes, yes.
You poured them in. You watched the VHS, and you'd have to stop it and try to rewind it so you could hear again what he said. But again, that was our humble beginnings. It was on the job training, and then whoever else was kind of involved in the industry trying to get more information out there.
I think I have a couple of those WreckMaster VHSs laying around here somewhere too. They're in my garage.
Those are worth a lot of money, Dennis.
VHSs were still a big part of it. Like when I went through, that was the early 2000s. It was still VHSs, right? I can remember the transition from VHS to DVDs. Yeah. But I'll tell you a little story about the first time I realized that training was not the industry standard. Because, like, for me, when I started, it was automatically, hey, you've been here for like a few days. We want to get you to a WreckMaster class. The next one available is in the spring. So I had to wait a couple of months. But I was under the impression that was the norm, that training was a standard thing. Because like so many towers, we get kind of locked into this idea that whatever we experience is the norm.
Yes.
And
yep. 100%.
The guys that I dealt with, very small group, they were all into this idea of training. They'd all bought into the idea that, hey, we need training, we need to do this, and they've gone through the WreckMaster program. So I got married, and my wife was accepted to the radiology program at Boise State. So I moved over there for 3 years while she finished school, and I worked for another company who was part of WreckMaster, Country Repair. Lyndon Johnson, just fantastic individual. I experienced a day where another guy came into the yard to pull something out of our impound yard. It was an accident or something. He was hauling it to the body shop. Beautiful truck. Had a bright red International extended cab. He was towing for a body shop, and so like they had done a fantastic paint job. It was beautiful, and it had a side puller, an in the ditch side puller on the back. I was fortunate in that I had dealt with Chuck, and I had gotten to run the first 3 side pullers that he ever built. And so I was very familiar with them. And
Awesome.
I saw that and I said, oh, hey, how do you like that side puller? Fully expecting him to talk about all the awesome things because I loved them and still love them. Like I would not build another truck without them. And he went to just cussing this side puller. That worthless piece of crap. That doesn't pull anything. The second I pull on it. And I was kind of dumbfounded. And so then I started asking him a couple of questions about like, what do you mean it won't pull? So he proceeds to tell me this story about how he's pulling something out of a canal, this like a 1-ton pickup, and he's pulling it into the bank, and he's got one line on it. He's single line pulling it, and it bogs out, and he overloads the winch, and it goes into bypass. And that was the moment where I realized, holy crap, not everybody understands this information. Not everybody has access to this. The guy had no idea. He had absolutely no idea how to properly use a snatch block or why that winch would have gone into bypass in the first place. So why is it so critical? There's a guy who had been running a beautiful piece of equipment. That truck's equivalent value would probably be, I don't know, $150,000, $160,000. He had no idea what to do. He was just given the keys, right? And he said, good luck.
Wow.
Which, unfortunately, I think even now, and things have gotten a lot better as we've discussed, but there's still a good portion of this industry that doesn't think training is required. They see training is still optional.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Shane, but would you not say that like the vast majority of our industry still thinks that training is like way, way down the list of priorities?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely down the list, and for several different reasons. But there's also a large share of organizations that have taken it seriously because they've identified the things that maybe we'll get into here as we talk. But there's so much that has changed in the industry so far. The number one, the equipment, right? So manufacturers of the equipment make some stellar equipment that's the designs, you got to know how the design was created and intended to be used, that sort of thing. You don't even have to go to our equipment. You can take a look at the vehicles. So, starting from, Shelli kind of made me talk about that University of Georgia program. The vehicles we were towing back then are entirely different than the vehicles that the operators have to deal with today. So that alone should tell us that there needs to be at least some training, and something as simple as, how do I get it into neutral? I don't want to get back into like old bad memories, but one of the things that's happened in the industry is the talent base. There's been a higher volume of vehicles put on the road. Fleets have grown to a large volume, so you have large fleets throughout the country, and the talent base, what used to be brought into the companies, and they would be brought up to speed and then given a truck, is now you have people that they come to training, and when we ask them what their previous job was, they have no connections to the towing industry at all. So there isn't any past experience that we can draw from. They're literally starting from square one. So the talent base has completely changed for the industry again, which kind of begs on this conversation. There's more of a need for training, not because we're in the training business per se. There's a need for training because there's a pretty significant void of knowledge and education and skills that aren't present in the new talent.
Right, but wouldn't you say, Shane? Wouldn't you say you'd rather have a fresh canvas, a blank canvas, than someone who's had 10, 15 years of bad habits that you've got to break?
Well, it's I'm never shy to turn away from a challenge. It's a little harder, the chains of habit are harder to break, right?
Absolutely.
So the blank canvas is a little bit easier to train or to teach, but that's not to say that the experienced canvases, that are already painted, doesn't mean you can't tweak it. I kind of refer to that. What's that gentleman's name that he said there are no mistakes in painting. We just have to.
Just happy little
Bob
Ross.
Ross. Bob Ross.
Bob Ross.
Hello.
Yeah. So
Yes.
there are no mistakes. As that's you kind of take some time to paint, some different things on the canvas, and turn the picture a little bit different. So, but yeah, it's definitely easier to start fresh than it is to break an old habit.
In the last 10 years, I feel like we've seen a drastic shift in the amount of people that are coming to training without having gained experience in the industry.
Yeah.
That's where they're starting. And I love to see that. I think that is one of the most positive signs in our industry, is that guys are coming earlier and more often to training classes because they have the opportunity to start that way and not, risk life and limb. Like if you have to find out the hard way for 10 to 15 or 20 years, your odds of getting you or someone else hurt go way up. And that's a sad comment, I feel like, on our industry. I would love to see the day where it is not the exception, but the rule, that you start out, if you want to come drive a tow truck, you need to go through some training before you get turned into a tow truck. Can you imagine someone going and practicing being an EMT before?
I don't want them to practice on me. I don't want them to practice on me. I'll tell you that right now.
Right, but we do that.
Not at all, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at,
I'd love to see the new guys in there.
if you look at similar industries, construction trades, sanitation trades, right? You don't just get handed the keys and you just don't get sent out on the road, right? You have to go through training. Even thinking about sanitation, right? You have to learn how to properly lift, right? You have to demonstrate that you can properly lift a bag so you don't throw your back out, right? The very basic fundamentals. And Shane, you mentioned a lot of operators coming from outside the industry and coming over. I was at one of your first heavy rigging classes in Oklahoma a few years back, and I remember there was a good chunk of that class were brand new to the industry. A lot of guys who'd come over from oil field work and things like that were looking for something a little bit different. And you're absolutely right. There are a lot of folks coming into this industry that are doing other things and looking to move over here, because if you do this right, there is a lifestyle here, right? It's not an easy business, but you can make decent money in this industry as a well-trained operator, knowing what you're doing.
Yeah. It's a
100%.
rewarding industry too. There's a lot of satisfaction that comes from doing this line of work.
So if we were to talk real-time action training on the ground in effect, what is a trained operator getting on scene for the first time, pulling up to an incident? What does that operator do differently than an inexperienced operator who may not be trained? How do they approach the scene differently? How do they view a scene differently? When you go into it with training in mind, what are the things you look for first that maybe an untrained operator would?
If I can borrow something from Shane, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, David Bouvier told me this story, that you were the one who coined the phrase, "This is the discipline," when we referred to scene. And so in the WreckMaster class, we teach the acronym SCENE, and it's the procedure that we go through on every single incident, no matter what we're doing, tow, recovery, no matter what, we follow the SCENE protocol. And that discipline, it plays out. What does it look like? It looks like someone that slows down, right? It's not a mad rush. It's not just skipping over all of these problems. It's taking it one step at a time. It's eating that elephant one bite at a time.
And that is so hard because you are filled with adrenaline. There is a person in need. It is on the roadside. Perhaps you have the law enforcement entity saying, "Clear my road," and just to take a deep breath, Bear, and just to step back. That is excellent advice.
Yeah. And so what does training look like in real time? When we're out there on the side of the road, how do I tell a difference between let's say, maybe not necessarily a trained, but an informed operator. Between that and a less informed operator, it slows. First comes right. My old man would say, first comes right, then comes fast. And to borrow another phrase that gets used a lot is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That is the essence of the informed and, for the purposes of this conversation, a trained operator.
Is that a phrase WreckMaster uses? I mean, are you guys floating that phrase around? Because I'm friends with an operator out of Iowa, Jake Schrader, and he said that before.
First comes right, then comes fast.
Yes. No, the smooth.
So the first time I ever heard that was shooting. Like I'm pretty sure that's an old Western phrase. I don't know if it's Western or not, but with regards to shooting.
Yeah.
No, but I love it.
Well, it's the same in every discipline, is that you start slow, right? And we can compare, there's lots of metaphors to plug in there. Right. So we didn't, everybody, like I've heard this more often than not. You learn how to crawl first, then you learn how to kind of stumble along when you start to walk. And the next thing you know, you can walk and then you can run. One of the expressions, and Bear, your comments here pulled this one up to mind. And Dennis, to answer your question, for me, a trained operator, somebody that carries the information, it has implemented what they've learned, right? So they have what I call a working knowledge. So they've got knowledge of all this equipment that they use. Is they're thinking. So there's an expression that I use is thinking people don't panic, and panicking people don't think.
Oh, yes.
So for me, a trained operator, it's still, and I know there's a lot of different scenes they can get into with the adrenaline. Shelli, you make a great point. The adrenaline does take over. There's a lot of pressure being put on the operators, but a thinking operator is going to do a complete survey. They're going to, establish communication, establish a safe work area. They're thinking about all those things as they're doing their scene evaluation, as what Bear had mentioned. And as they're thinking it through, it's going to be a streamlined execution of effort, as opposed to, well, let me try this first. Well, that doesn't work. All right, well, let me go to plan B. Well, that's not working quite so well. Let me go to plan C. And then a lot of those backup plans actually eat more time. And that's kind of where I kind of flip the words being responsive versus being reactive. Somebody that's not trained or doesn't have that information, they're more reactive because they're just trying to get the problem solved with all of those pressures Shelli was talking about.
Oh, and Renee will say it like this. It is ready, fire, aim.
Yeah.
He'll say that situation was ready, fire, aim.
Yeah.
So we know mistakes happen, things go wrong, right? Shane, I've heard you refer to it as Mr. Murphy coming to work. So we've had these things happen all the time, right? You hooked to something that maybe wasn't as solid as it looked, or something else like that. But what would you say are the most common avoidable mistakes, things that you can look out for to prevent Murphy from joining us on the scene? I got them both thinking at the same time. Look at that.
I know. I'm like, Dennis, am I allowed to jump in here with?
Please take over.
Yeah. No, you guys, it's your stage. Go for it.
You're good. Go ahead, Shell.
No, I got nothing right now. Keep talking.
So I think, to kind of build on what Bear said about the WreckMaster discipline and scene, is avoiding Murphy is having a structured routine for yourself mentally. So there's got to be a mental construct that you have, so that the approach to every job you do, whether it's a road service call, a basic, like a basic tow right onto the major incident, is that every one of those situations that is tasked has a structured routine mentally. And part of that is the assessment. So when you're doing an assessment, a basic jump start, if you flip the hood open and you see a bunch of, gases and acid around that battery, that's a hazard recognition that says, well, I probably ought to have the right PPE on, and I probably don't want to put the cables on it because that battery may explode. Right? All the way to being on a major incident scene where it's like, okay, hey, I've got traffic buzzing by and my truck's going to be positioned a little too close to the lane. I'm going to need some scene protection first before I ever start, put the PTO in gear and start dragging the radio. So for me, it's having that mental structure, that mindset and that structure, so that every job is a structured response.
I think about it like a military protocol, or let's just say a protocol, like having it just on repeat in your brain. These are the checkpoints when I show up to the scene, and you do it so much, you do it without thinking.
Yeah. It becomes muscle memory. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Great point.
Well, and I want to kind of jump down a couple of steps. So we've talked about like the scene keeps coming up because it is one of the most useful tools is this idea that you incorporate a protocol, because that protocol, that standard operation is the thing that helps kind of keep the ball in the lane. Like it's the bumpers on the bowling lane. It keeps you like you're going to have a little bit of chaos no matter what. We can't eliminate all the chaos, but that protocol helps keep you on the rails. And the one part of that, if I had to point one thing out, I would say the thing that we do the poorest in our industry is explain. So in seeing the first E stands for explain, and that our ability to communicate is one of the most underutilized things in the industry-wide. We are, by and large, terrible communicators. We need a lot of help with that.
Should I teach a class on communication?
I was going to say most of our wives and girlfriends would probably agree with that.
Absolutely.
Well, I was going to say, should I build out a curriculum of communication? Because God bless America.
Yeah.
I probably know a little bit about talking, right?
I would say, yeah, that would be.
What did my dad say to me, Dennis? My dad's like, Shellbuck, you could talk the bark right off of a tree, baby. There you go. We need some communication. We need to be able to communicate. You're spot on, Bear.
I like the Shelli. Is there a shorter version of this story? How does it go?
Yes, baby. Was there a fast forward button? Is there a shorter version of this story? Oh yeah. Yes.
Training costs money, right? We know that. It costs time. You have to pull an operator out of a truck. You have to send him into class a day, 2, put him up in a hotel, feed him, make sure he gets there, make sure he gets all the materials. There is a cost to this. What is the ROI that we see on training? What is the actual tangible financial benefit to a business for trained operators?
I literally just had this pop into my brain. Are you guys ready? I'm going to blow you away.
Bring
Take
it.
us away.
The more, and this can be across other industries, the more proactive you are for our podcast with training, the more proactive you are, the less reactive you will have to be.
Love
so
it.
you step into a situation where there's a gigantic amount of towing companies and their claims are just through the roof. Well, oh my gosh, what do I need to do first and foremost? How do I get these claims down? The assessment is, okay, we need training. What is our highest amount of transactions being done? Light duty. Okay, I'm going to focus on those light duty operators first to show them proper protocols of how they respond to all the services. Bring those claims down, and then the more proactive you can be, the less reactive you have to be. I don't know. You said it here. I just made that up.
No, that's a great way to put it, Shelli. Yeah, great way.
So we hear a lot of times, like at shows, at anytime we're out somewhere, guys will say, oh, I just can't afford to send my guy to training. Sometimes it's a matter of like dollars and cents. Can't afford to. More often anymore, it's time. It's the time that they're gone away from the shop that guys say, I can't afford to have my guy gone for 4 days. I would like an opinion on this. Tell me if I'm wrong. Is there a more finite asset in the towing industry than the operator?
You will afford the time now when it seems like you can't afford the time, or you will afford the time later when there is a tragic accident and, God forbid, a fatality, and ocean steps in, and then you say, I wish I did this. I should have done this. It is going to happen either before the situation or after the situation.
Right. And that, like, my opinion is on that ROI, you are building your asset. Your most valuable and most finite asset as your personnel, you are building them. Like if you had to list things like, okay, what's more important, claims or personnel or time or relationships, like I have the biggest priority on building the relationship between me as an owner and my team, because that is the thing that is going to translate into a more effective company. Like as an owner, you're not ever dealing with your customer. If you are dealing with your customer as an owner, it's because something has gone terribly wrong and you are putting out a fire. Like your team is who is interacting with your customer, and therefore they are the face of the company, and they are the thing that someone thinks of when they think of you or your company. It's not me as the owner, it's my driver. So if I'm not building them, I'm lacking in that department of building that customer relationship, because that's the biggest thing right there. Like, that's how you take a customer and turn them into a loyal customer, is you build a relationship between them and the one that's going to service them.
To that point, in my professional career as an operator and elsewhere, when I feel like I'm being invested in as a employee, as an operator or whatever other role you're in, when you feel like your employer is taking that time to invest in you to make you better, it makes you more willing to stay and more willing to not look elsewhere, not look to leave, not to and be more present at work and be more present in the role and be more involved.
I am a leader, not just a steering wheel holder.
Yeah. You can take any, and all of you have made like stellar points here. If you really just, Bear, making the investment into the operator, and Dennis saying that, showing the investment is really going to bring a different level of awareness. Like, there's a different level of care, when the employee feels like, hey, this guy actually cares that I know what I'm supposed to be doing, so that I go home at the end of the day or the end of the shift, right? Shelly, you hit it most directly, as the proactive piece, right? If they're proactive in making sure that they, to Bear's point, establish relationships, through it, how does training play that in? Well, the effectiveness of the operator, the efficiency of the operator, customers, they break down between point A and point B. They want to be back on their timeline as soon as possible without a damage claim. Like all of these are connected, right? It's like a spider web of connections. So there is no single greatest ROI, because every one of them touches the other. If you have a damage claim, that damages the relationship. That may then make the operator feel like less confident. So then they decide they don't want to do this anymore. So then they leave, and that turns into turnover rates. And that just turns back and supports the, some of the old school. I've heard that my whole career is, well, what if I train them and they leave?
Yes.
And I've heard it multiple times in the last 5 or 10 years. What if you don't train them and they stay?
Yes. 100%.
So
I love that. We are going to post in the show notes, Dennis, the link for the folks to be able to see. We're doing a live webinar this week, actually, with Vernon and Matt Oliver from Mission Wrecker in San Antonio, Texas. They're going to go into great detail on their 6 weeks of training when they hire a new operator, no matter what level the skill set is. Because their approach is, that's fantastic. You may have had some skills that you learned at another towing company. We want to teach you the Mission Wrecker way. We want to show you a clear path of growth and leadership in our company. And we want to ensure, if you know how to throw dollies, just credentially show us that you know how to do it, etc. But what a fantastic group of folks over there at Mission Wrecker. Their training program is exceptional. I love that we're talking about all this. We're going to put that in the show notes too.
Nice. I used to say it when we, in our family business, we had a couple of accounts, and my dad had already spent enough time structuring a specific way that we were supposed to tow this one account's trucks. That's the only way. My dad figured it out. He's like, okay, I'm going to show you guys how it's done. All the equipment's on this truck. This is how you do it. And so we kind of coined the phrase, this is the Coleman way to do it, right? This is how you do it on that tow. More and more, I hear businesses saying, this is how we do it here. And to me, that puts the personal signature on it to establish professionalism, quality, consistency. And, to Bear's point, that builds that relationship with the customer, that, they put enough time and energy and attention into making sure that it's done the Mission way, or, however.
Customers love consistency. They know when that truck shows up, they're going to have the same experience every time, no matter the operator that is in that seat. The consistency of it, they don't question. They know it's going to happen, and they can rely on it.
I would say that they love consistency as long as it's consistently good.
Right.
You're not wrong, Barry. You're not wrong.
Like my kids love Little Caesars. Little Caesars is probably as consistent as it gets. We don't get Little Caesars when I'm there because it's not that good. Like
well, to be fair, they don't advertise that it's good. They advertise that it's hot and it's ready. That's
right.
That's
Domino's. I I wake up on a Saturday morning and it's always Domino's that Renee has gotten from Uber Eats. It's always Domino's if you want to go for the consistency.
Right. Now, and like I don't that isn't a downplay on consistency is good. Consistency is good, but consistently good is the desirable quality there. And it's one of those things where, like, you talk about people who are or organizations that are building a theme within their company of this is the Coleman way, or my good friend Casey Burrows, this is the Burrows way. He used that phrase a lot, and it meant something to them. People, we are herd animals.
Yes.
Right? Like we are social creatures. And so this idea of us belonging to a tribe is something that we thrive on and we crave. We want to have that. And especially when belonging to that tribe or belonging to that group helps us to become something that is more desirable. That is what drives, but that's what gets employees to stay somewhere, even though the pay may not be as good as it is somewhere else. They're staying there because they feel they have this sense of belonging, and not just belonging to a place, but belonging to a good place.
100%, for sure. I'm going to ask the question, Dennis. You both stand in front of small, medium, and large classes of folks that you're going to teach new skills to that they don't know, reinforce the skills that they potentially already have in their toolbox. There are two different types of folks, probably more than two, but for example, someone who is eager. They are eager to learn. They are a dry sponge, ready to soak up every single thing that you say, and their brain goes, yep, I know that already. I understand, the D to D. I understand all the things and whatever, but this confirms it and I'm excited about it. Or B, oh my gosh, this is a new learning for me. I'm going to learn it and take it in. And that person is just that person that you want to have on staff. And then the other one is just sits down in the chair, arms crossed. It's your turn to bless me and see if you can teach me anything. I think it's pretty easy to manage the first one. How in the world do you guys handle this guy? My boss has me here and I don't want to be here. And, how do you break through that? Or we're going to have operators like that listening to this. What would you say to those folks, or how do you handle that?
Well, I'll throw in on that one first. Because if we're being honest to ourselves, or transparent, I guess is a better word for it. We all do it.
Yes.
Like, all of us do that. We do one of those three that you described. All of us do it. Yeah. Some of us may do it with a little more, gruff attitude. Some of us may not. But at the end of the day, what I've kind of learned is that everybody comes to training for their own reason. And it's kind of incumbent on the instructor to learn what those expectations are of everybody in the rig. So, there's different instructional tools and methods and different things, not from a manipulation standpoint, but just to get on the same page, to connect to everybody that's in the room. Yes. And when you get to learn why they're there, whether they were voluntold or whether they volunteered, is that they've come there for a specific reason. Yes, they may be there, on their day off or whatever, but yeah, you're here anyway. So tell me one thing that you want to pick up out of this class. What's one thing that you'd like to grab? And you can usually get them to answer at least with that one question. And when whatever they tell you, that gives you your opportunity. So that, that not only does the instructor connect with them, but that gives you your opportunity to make sure when you get to that part of whatever you're teaching, you can reach out to that person and say, okay, here's what you wanted to know. And really what that does is it adds value to that expectation. And most of the time is we all have it, Bear. I'm sure you've had it. Every instructor has it. Shelli, you're dead on. You have the arms folded. They're sipping their coffee.
God bless America.
Yeah. Yeah. So but eventually they're looking for an instructor that's going to connect with them. Just say, hey, I'm here for you, for each and every one of you. What is it that you'd like to pick up? And a lot of times you can kind of break the ice that way.
I'll just piggyback on that real quick. I actually, 14 years ago last month, I took my first WreckMaster class with Ron Pullen. We did an in-house 2-3 over at Mike's Heavy Duty. And I very specifically, remember Ron saying, if you can take away one thing from this class, just one thing from this weekend, it'll be of value to you. Take something away that you can remember that you can use in your daily life. And at the time, I was a dispatcher. I was the weekend night dispatcher. I wasn't working very hard. It wasn't too complicated, right? I was a young kid. I was the fill-in guy. Great, You're here at night, and you're a warm body. But the one thing I took away from that class was we would run into a lot of things. Like at the time, you had a lot of the Mitsubishis were changing model numbers, and you had the FEs coming out, and all these different model and make combinations that drivers driving these little box trucks never have any idea how big the truck actually is. They can never tell you the weight of the vehicle. But what I took away from Ron's class was tire size. If you know your tire size, you know what vehicle you have to send. If you know it's sitting on 19s, you can probably get away with sending a 12-ton. If it's sitting on 22s, you need a bigger truck. And that was the one thing I took away from that class as a dispatcher and made me want to come back for more every single time.
Nice.
Are we telling stories about our first WreckMaster class now?
Absolutely.
Go for it.
2014, Janesville, Wisconsin. I believe that's when Miller Industries sponsored WreckMaster. We had a 5130 with low sides. I can see it in my brain right now, and she was beautiful. Dewey's from Beloit. Josh Waddell and his family brought up a 2465. That was a beautiful light-duty wrecker. Josh is going to correct me if it's not the right model, but I just remember just being so curious and wanting to learn every single thing that I could about this industry and how these folks operated. We did a rollover. It was a 2.3. It was not a 4.5. It was like it was all the folks in customer service and on the sales team at AW Direct. So it was like a little bit out of the norm. Kurt Wilson, Scott A., those were our instructors. Kurt Wilson did the majority of our teaching. And it's just beyond impactful for me to get my start in learning all of this.
So, I want to reach back to something that Shane said when we were talking about it. So they want you to tell you why. That why. So for me, it goes back to the Simon Sinek book, Start With Why.
Yes.
If I had to point to one thing, Shelli, on your initial question of how you deal with the guy that's got his arms crossed, you figure out his why, or how to connect with him questioning why. And something that Shane said is they're all wanting you to tell them something, or to make that sense. I kind of butchered that. I apologize, Shane, but I would say that is probably true for about 98% of the guys. That, you get even most of the guys that are kind of sitting back there with their arms crossed right there, they want to be engaged in class, and you try to figure out how to connect with that emotional response that's tied to why. But then you have that 2% of guys that it doesn't matter. It doesn't, maybe not always, but it really is tough to find out what they're after. They're just going to sit there with their arms crossed. And sometimes that's the hostage that you've got to shoot. And, I want to say that kindly and politely, but there's some of those guys that you have to make things hurt in order for some of us. And I say this as a tower who myself is pretty hard-headed in a lot of ways. For some of us, it takes catastrophe to get us to change our mindset. And I feel like we're kind of in that state as an industry. We are on the brink as an industry of catastrophe because we're so unwilling to accept new things. We're hanging on to this idea of this is how it was. This is how we've always done it. And
those are the most dangerous words in business.
Right. There's some times that the old ways are still the best way, but that's rare. Most of the time, if you can't let go of the $5 bill that's in your hand, you can't reach out and grab the 20. You have to be willing to let go of some of that stuff. And for a lot of, I wouldn't even say a lot of us, but there are a few that we have to make it hurt. You have to bring a scenario into that classroom where they recognize that the consequences of their decisions are final, in the grave final. And that's the only way you can get through to some of those guys. And fortunately, the vast majority of the class is able to recognize without them having to be the one that has to get shot.
Wise words, Mr. Godfrey. I think the underlying word here is arrogance. It's a pretty strong word, but we see it every single day. And arrogance inhibits progress. It inhibits learning. It is that barrier where I think I know everything. And once that can be broken down, once you can realize that this is camaraderie. These are my people. This is my tribe. Like, I want to connect with them like for the long term, and I want to learn from them. And then all that melts down, and you realize that you have an amazing group of connections to just continue to learn and grow as you go through all the different stages of becoming an exceptional operator.
So one of the themes of this show in general, this podcast, the Tow Trend podcast, is going to be not only where the industry is now, but where are we headed? What is next for this industry? So in that vein, what is next for training? What are the next things that we are going to see technology-wise, information-wise? What are the next challenges that are coming up? What do you guys see as the future of training for this industry over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
I've got a sassy comment. Am I allowed to verbalize it? Well, I mean, our OEMs really need to get on board with sharing information about every single chassis out there on the roadway. As we modernize technology, and I mean small, medium, even like, Kenworth, all of the chassis and vehicle manufacturers, because as they get more sophisticated, as they become a piece of technology on wheels, we really need to strengthen our relationships with those OEM vehicle manufacturers.
Yeah.
As the future.
I'd agree. Yeah, for sure.
It wasn't really sassy. It was just,
No, but it wasn't. It was actually pretty respectful.
Yes.
But it's there again. It's something that's sorely needed, right? Because there's so many different modifications and changes. One small example, when we talk like EVs and hybrids and that sort of thing, there's so many different configurations and standards. Like the standards for hybrids and EVs are different than the standards for a regular, internal combustion engine vehicle.
Yeah.
One operator brought it up in a training a few months ago. He was rooting around in a 2025 Volvo and realized that one of the batteries that was located in the chassis was actually wired for 48 volts, but it had black conduit or black wiring connected to it. And to him, black means 12 volt, like black and red is 12 volt. And that could have been a wake-up call for him, had he interacted with it incorrectly. So, getting that OEM knowledge, the transparency for the OEM knowledge, I think one of the tools that's probably the strongest tool going forward is the emergency response guides that they created for hybrid and EVs, because that kind of mushroomed open into similar to what AAA has done for a couple of decades now with their towing manuals. How do we provide the various levels of service? So how can I quickly access the information I need to know for that year, make, and model based on the service that I need to provide? And so that from a technology standpoint, I think between, apps and maybe web-based information, if we could get, heavy engagement or support from the OEMs, I think that'd be fantastic. And, the future, to answer your question, Dennis, I think, the future of training is going to be a full-on implementation of all these pieces of training. Everything from a virtual platform to, pre-recorded things, whether it's podcasts or, channels that they can go to pick up tips and tricks, even right on into the response guides, that all of that needs to be integrated. And, training from a whole, I don't look at it as just what myself and Bear and and all the other training entities that are out there. I don't look at it as just what we're doing. I look at training from the standpoint is, what is that independent company doing? Maybe it's just a 15-minute huddle up, to say, hey, we had an operator that had a close call yesterday. I just want to huddle you guys up together and run you through the quick, standard operating guideline or procedure. If any of you other guys get into this scenario, that's training too. Like you're just spreading that information out. I think the future is going to be a kind of a full-on hybrid of everything from virtual to apps to hands-on. It's going to be a lot different than what we see today. I
would say that, like, that idea of hybridization of training, like we have seen in the last few years a shift from what was acceptable training or what was desired training being this in-person, face-to-face, reach out and be able to touch you training. I think we've seen some changes that are going to allow us to use our technology for communication a little more effectively. It's these online trainings that get more information out there. Now, do I believe that standing in the same room with someone is the best possible option? I do. I'm still a believer in that. I'm still a believer in the idea that that personal connection that you get from being able to read someone's body language, from or being able to interpret their tone, that provides for the best possible learning outcomes. And I'm convinced that will remain the case. But we still have to get like that lower tier. Like if we can't get to the very top tier, let's get the next step down. And these meetings, like the technology that allows us to all sit at different corners of the country and talk together with the delay being almost non-existent, like that is going to be fantastic. And we're seeing that transition from an industry that has been very resistant to change to now being more accepting of that. That's going to really change. But the biggest thing I see in the future is that formal education is going to be required, whether it's from the municipalities that we're towing for or our insurance companies. If you are involved in the towing industry and you are not terrified of what's happening to insurance, you will have your head in the sand. Insurance companies are fleeing the towing market because it has been a terrible bet. If they're going to stay in the towing industry, they're going to require that you be proactive, that you be a change agent in your company, because if they don't, they're going to lose their backsides on it.
100% agree. Think about every single other industry out there that requires training, certification before you can start becoming a professional. And when you can show that to your insurance company, the insurance company says, okay, my risk goes down because at least these are credentialed individuals that understand somewhat of what they're doing. So I'm taking less of a risk.
Absolutely. And the idea that one time is enough. Of course it's not. Like you need to go back and be reminded of things over and over and over again. Just ask every wife how many times she has to remind her husband to finish whatever.
It comes
reminded every.
Shelly, how many times do you have to remind Renee to clean up?
Zero. I broke that real fast, but I'm reminded of my mom. I reminded of my mom. She would say to me over and over again as a child, your life can change in a split second. And it will be changed forever when a mistake is made. And you can just get into your vehicle and just put it in drive just like you normally do. When you are distracted, when you are not aware, your life will change drastically in a split second. So just piggybacking on what you're saying over there, Bear, I mean, the training, the camaraderie, the credentialing, just so crucial.
I think somebody says the training never stops. Is that somebody's tagline?
Yeah. I was just thinking, it's funny you say that. And I guess if I could take anything away, even this would apply to everybody that may listen to this, that's an operator. Even, and I just read this yesterday morning, even the masters have to go back and study the basics.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because
100%.
We've heard of those expressions, if you don't use it, you lose it,
Yes.
All of the skills that a towing operator, embodies are perishable skills. So if you haven't done a particular method, technique, rigging system or whatever, you haven't done that in a while, just go back and practice it and kind of knock the rust off. But the fundamentals or the basics is really where it lies. And that all of the other skills are built on those basics. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, this has been an enlightening conversation, and we thank you, gentlemen, again for joining us. Would love to get a final thought from both of you and how we can reach you, find your stuff, find your agencies. Bear, we'll start with you this time if you'd like to give us a final thought.
So, I feel like there's so many things that we can take from outside sources. I grew up reading Louis L'Amour books.
Of course you did.
They're my favorite, right? They really are. So in this one Louis L'Amour book, and I can't remember because they're so very similar, but he mentions this, and I'm sure that someone else has said it. He said, the enemy of ignorance is travel. And along with that, this idea that we get locked into our own mindset in our own little microcosm where we stay and we exist. If we don't get outside of that, if we're not willing to take a step outside of it, we'll never learn what could be. We'll only see what is. And then kind of as a final thought, I would say this: there are things in this world that are acted upon, and then there are things that act. And we were meant to be things that act and are not acted upon. And I believe if we could keep that mentality, I think we will see massive progress throughout the industry.
And for folks that don't know, how do we reach WreckMaster? How do we find WreckMaster?
WreckMaster.com. It is the big green site, right? Info@WreckMaster.com is the email address. WreckMaster on Facebook, WreckMaster.com. And all of the training offerings that we have are there. Just about any state or province in North America.
Excellent. Shane, final thoughts.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground here as we talked. I kind of pull it back to the word abilities. So everything that we've discussed here is really just talking about, individuals' abilities, their abilities to task jobs, to get home safely and so on. And I think it sums up in 3 words that really, I think if you want to take it to heart, it speaks to the culture change that needs to happen in the industry. And those 3 abilities is number 1, responsibility. So everybody, operator, business owner, manager, anybody that has anything to do with this profession has a responsibility to make sure they're bringing their best to the game. The second would be accountability. So it's okay to be held accountable, and it's okay to hold others accountable for when they're doing something that's out of standard or that's unsafe. Operator jumps out of his truck, doesn't have his class 3 vest on, a little bit of accountability. You don't have to yell and scream and point fingers and that. And you say, hey man, go get your vest on. We're going to be doing some work out here. It's just little things like that where the accountability can help keep them safe. And, the consequence of taking responsibility and holding people accountable is going to help alleviate the other ability, which is liability. That's going to be the issue. To me, those are the abilities that we have to focus on as an industry to make sure that all of us are standing shoulder to shoulder to make sure that this industry becomes one of the best on the planet from a safety standpoint. So I wouldn't stay in this industry if I didn't think it was the greatest industry I could be involved with. It's a very rewarding career. It's satisfying at every level. Yes, we take our abuses, long hours and, not so friendly customers and that sort of thing, but push all of that stuff aside and get the gray area, get out of the gray area. And I think those 3 things would be the core into moving into our culture, going into, Dennis, you've said several times, what does 2030 look like? What does 2040 look like? And what I would hope, by that time is that those 3 abilities are at the forefront of what we're talking about.
Excellent. And then Shane, how do we reach you? How do we locate ERSCA?
Easiest way, ERSCAtraining.org. So it's an ORG, being the nonprofit. So ERSCAtraining.org. Email is going to be staff@ERSCAtraining.org. It's a great way. We got a lot of eyeballs on the email. So our training calendar is up there. Obviously, all of our courses are available. Pretty easy to find. It all goes out the name these days.
Excellent. Appreciate it. And have to take a moment here to thank our sponsor. This episode of the Tow Trend Podcast is brought to you by Atura, powering safer, smarter, and more connected towing operations through data and technology to keep communities moving. Learn more at Atura.com. That's AUTURA.com. Shelli, any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
I was just wondering if you had memorized that. It sounded really good. Have you memorized that yet?
I did. It's burned in the back of my brain. It's here.
I believe it. No, this has been absolutely fantastic. I look forward to hearing from operators of all different levels and what their thoughts are. And if you have not ever gone out for a training, that to me, that's where leadership can begin. If you want you want more tools in the toolbox, a greater skill set, you want to understand why you're doing what is working. So that's where a lot of these light bulb moments happen, is when you go to the training. But this has been fantastic. Shane Coleman, Bear Godfrey, thank you guys. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a great time. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.